Feist, Multitudes album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning here tonight to chat about this latest album from Miss Leslie Feist, aka Feist. You may know her from her work in Broken Social Scene, or also her numerous solo albums she's been at since the early 2000s. And while I wasn't that into her debut album Monarch, her Let It Die album made me an overnight fan of Feist's music. This was a really interesting blend of everything from lounge music to bossa nova. It was also half covers and half original material on this album, something that I'm usually kind of against at the end of the day, but she did it so wonderfully and made me an overnight fan. And if I was an overnight fan already, I was even more so when she dropped her legendary album, The Reminder, which honestly was one of the first indie albums that I ever even picked up. I distinctly remember going out and buying this album when it came out and enjoying it, and I still do. I think it's aged wonderfully from, some of her bigger singles like 1, 2, 3, 4 and My Moon, My Man, as well as some exquisite deep cuts like The Limit to Your Love. Feist overnight was an indie superstar. Now, it was quite some time until she followed it up with her Metals album, and I'm going to be candid with y'all, I still think it's her worst album. It was just not the follow-up that I was looking for. And while there are great tracks on there like How Come You Never Go There and Graveyard, these to me are A+ Feist classics. Overall, though, I just felt like she phoned in so much of the album. I've never been a fan of it. So much so that I almost completely wrote off her last album, Pleasure, when it came out. And clearly, I'm an idiot because it ended up being one of my favorite albums of the year. I thought it was a really luscious, beautiful return to form with some really great singles, specifically the Century single, which made it into my top 20 singles of the year. Now, it's been 6 years since we've heard from Feist, and she has given us quite a few very interesting new singles, running the gamut from some really nice ballads to some of her more experimental and, very colorful singles as well. Let's chat about this thing. Enlightening starts this album off, and Feist brings out the big guns for here. This track is absolutely a very lush, very colorful, very exciting intro track. It almost sounds like something out of the book of like Tune Yards, but it very quickly turns into kind of what you would expect from Feist with some artsier twists. Like some of the production tricks and sound effects used on this track, they are damn near abrasive and just really out there. But Feist's incredibly sweet and charming performance does bring things back down a peg to kind of where we're usually at with her, and that's not a bad thing. This is a great opener. Add on a hazy atmosphere and a really great guitar solo. This is a pretty wild opener. It's a big risk, especially just to kind of start off the album like this, but hey, it works for me. Now, Forever Before, on the other hand, this is much more in the wheelhouse of some classic Feist. It's stripped down, it's tender, it's charming, her vocals are to die for. It's a quiet, pensive ballad, but my goodness, does it ever really justify that plus 5-minute runtime. Love Who We Are Meant To. I've loved this track for a while now. It is absolutely a tearjerker. Break out the tissues on this one. It is absolutely stunning. I mean, this is nothing new. When Feist has, in the past locked in on that sort of quiet, pensive ballad sound, I mean, she locks in on it like nobody else and creates sheer magic, and those vocals soar. This is one of the best ballads I've heard all year. Genuinely makes you stop in your tracks. It is beautiful. And Hiding Out in the Open is a little bit more on the artsier side. Not too much. I do like the vocal layering a lot. It gives it a little bit of an experimental flair, but Feist's vocals still make this a very intimate, very in-your-face performance. It's got some depth to it, but it doesn't take away from the heart and soul of this track, and that's why it works. It's heartwarming and has a strong universal message. Now, there are some pretty low lows as well, and that's what kind of threw me off, because I was really hoping to love this album, but then I hear tracks like The Red Wing, which I do think is the worst track here. There are so many sweet, sentimental ballads on this album that warm my soul, but then I hear this, and it's so faceless and not captivating at all. What happened here? Like, this track just blows right on by, doesn't hit me at all, blah. And I have a lot of the same feelings on I Took All of My Rings Off. This is just so flimsy compared to some of the earlier sounds on this album. And it's not like the songwriting's bad. I just feel like this track just doesn't come together. Like the chorus, for example. It's genuinely sweet. It's got some cool elements to it. Right on. But overall, this track is just so average. It's very middle of the road. And Become the Earth, why is this track so flimsy? There's no earthly reason that this track should be just so light and fluffy, way too much so. And you know, I don't have a problem with Feist going with a lighter sound. I mean, look at the great amount of truly awesome ballads on this album. But this track sounds like if I put my fan on, or the lightest breeze was blowing, that this track would just blow away entirely. And listen, if you like this, I get it. Her vocals are just as smoky and bluesy and gorgeous as always. But I personally feel like there are like 8 other tracks on this album that hit so much harder than that. And Song for Sad Friends, as a finale, what happened here? Why is this so... I don't know. This track's just a little too cute and fluffy for me. This track sounds like she would have wrote this to do a rendition of this on Sesame Street instead of her 1, 2, 3, 4 performance. She's better than this. Come on. And we hear it on tracks like Oh, Womankind. This track is unbelievable. This track is one of the most meditative tracks on this entire album, and the harmonies are absolutely to die for. Also, really love Feist's very wordy, very intense, very heady lyrical performance on this track. It's a little something new, but I like that. And this may be the most elegant art pop that I've heard all year. No joke. It's absolutely enchanting, and the strings are a really nice touch. And I still think Borrowed Trouble is the best track here. I've loved this since it dropped as a single. It is the most colorful and, dare I say, explosive track on this album. It's pretty wild. It's got everything I want. These verses are methodical, but just charming enough, and this chorus is just huge. And by the end of this track, it is a damn anthem. Martyr Moves is really great too. Like, I listened to some of the lighter ballads on here that didn't really hit me, and then I listened to this track, which has this rustic, very old school, almost like medieval sense of beauty to it. Almost reminds me of something out of the early days of Wise Blood. And my lord, it is staggering. When Feist is on, Feist is on. This track is completely out there, not something I expected to hear on this album, but my goodness, does it ever work. And Calling All the Gods is a super cool dose of art pop that almost sounds like it was Kate Bush inspired. I love the vocal layering, I love the production choices. This track is, once again, pretty out there. The strummed verses are lovely. The vocal layering is super weird. This track is great. I wish this album was the finale to this album. And by the end of this track, it's one of the sunniest and most kaleidoscopic moments of euphoria on this whole entire album. Yeah, I'm kind of torn here because the material here that is so good is just Feist on her A game. Bringing out some weirder stuff, but also bringing out some of the most lush ballads I've heard in any genre this year, and I can't help but commend that. My hat is certainly off to that. Where it gets a little iffy is some of the lighter ballads that just sound way too flimsy for their own good. God, they are so boring and faceless, and I just know that Feist can do better because she does do better on the majority of this album. I don't know. As a full project, I think I like Pleasure a little bit more, but still, this is Feist doing her thing. Yes, there are some pretty low lows, but there's also a lot of very high highs. I'm feeling a decent 7 on this album, but let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.